Hello, everybody. Welcome to Female Perspectives on Coaching Speed and Power Athletes. So thank you very much for Athletics Canada for putting this event on. My name is Angela Whyte. I will be the, moderator, if you will, or person to keep the conversation going. Just hoping to have a real candid, open conversation with some power speed athletes and Dr. Kraft about female issues, if you will, or athletes with who compete with a uterus, if you will, or female-bodied athletes. Before we get further, a couple of housekeeping things. You are all muted in this Zoom meeting. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and address them in the questions dialog box on your screen. And we'll leave probably about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of our conversation for any questions that you have. Other than that, we're just going to have a conversation to give some insight from a female athlete perspective on, especially from a power and speed side of things. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted in the coming days on the Athletics Canada website in the coaching section. And any coaches who are here tonight or this afternoon, wherever you are in the country, if you have entered your NCCP number, you will receive 1 PD point, so 1 professional development point for your participation in this webinar. So with all that out of the way, again, my name is Angela Whyte, a little, hopefully brief introduction. I have been on the Canadian national team for quite some time. I am a 3-time Olympian. I've been on, I believe, I should know, 7 IAAF outdoor world championship teams, 3 indoor world championship teams, a Commonwealth Games medalist, a Pan American Games medalist. Beyond competing as an athlete, I've also coached. I've coached power speed athletes. And I've also have done now work, now that I've left the coaching world for a little bit, have done work as a mental training consultant for athletes. My primary event is the 100-meter hurdles, but later in my career, I have decided to take on the world of heptathlon, which is probably where I've always belonged, but which has been really interesting. So now I'm going to turn it over to our panelists for them to give an introduction of themselves, and we'll start with Marissa.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Marissa. I am a para track and field athlete in the 100 and 200 meter, and my classification is T64. So amongst women missing a limb below the knee. I guess a little bit about myself. I got started in this sport when I was 13 years old. I'm 21 right now. And I've competed in 3 world championships teams, and I competed at the Rio 2016 Paralympic Games. I guess like a little extra about myself. I am currently a student as well as being a full-time athlete. I am at Ryerson University in my 4th year for sports media, and I'm hoping that in the future, when I'm done, my athletics career, that I can get into broadcast and advocate for the lack of Paralympic coverage and parasport coverage that we see on television, and help change society's perspective of disability. And it's actually International Persons with Disabilities Day, so that's actually kind of a cool segue to that. And yeah, that's just like, I guess, a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thank you, Marissa. We'll now move on to Crystal. If you could give us an introduction.
Well, hi, I'm Crystal Emmanuel, 2-time Olympian, currently the national record holder in the 200 meters. I also do the 100 and the 4x1. I'm currently full-time track athlete, no school, no work, enjoying the track world and the pain that comes with it. And that's it. That's the fun about me.
That's still really good fun. And then I would like to turn it over to Dr. Kraft to give an introduction of herself.
So I'm Sara Kraft. So I'm a primary care sport and exercise medicine doctor. So I'm actually trained as a family doctor, but I did extra training in sport and exercise medicine, and that's my main practice right now. And I work in a sport medicine clinic, seeing all sorts of people at different activity levels, but I also work with Athletics Canada as the doctor at the National Team East Training Hub. And I also traveled with our Canadian team to last year's Para Athletics World Championships.
Fantastic. So obviously a great body of experience from this panel, which is fantastic to have when we speak on the topic of coaching speed and power athletes from a female perspective. So with that said, we have a few questions that we'll have a conversation about, and then at the end be able to turn it over. For anybody who's watching this, if you have questions, again, remember to just leave them in the questions dialogue box, excuse me, and we will address them at the end. And if you have a question that's specific, if you could please put the person's name that you're addressing the question to, or you can also say an open question so that anyone on the panel can answer it. So the first question that we'd like to get to today is, what are the body image issues that speed power athletes deal with? And so I will have Crystal answer this question first.
Body. That's a big topic. I know, like, talking to a lot of females in sprinting and stuff. It's a lot of, oh, you need to be thin. Oh, to go fast, you need to be thin, or you look big. And I'm like, huh? Like, I'm kind of confused. Like, what do you mean I look big? I work hard for this body to run fast with the body I have. So that's one of the issues I've heard a lot, that a lot of people look like, oh, you look really skinny, like you look thicker like the year before. So I'm like, I'm kind of lost at that myself. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but for me, that's one of the biggest issues for me.
And Marissa, what's your experience when it comes to body image issues concerning speed power athletes?
I think it's something really similar to what Crystal said. Like there's supposed to be like this perfect ideal size that's like, you can't be too skinny, but you also can't be too heavy at the same time. And like, I really like battled with this last season because I'm still really young and my body is still changing a lot. Like it's changed tremendously, like considering I started this sport at 13 and like gone through puberty and like all that stuff, and like becoming more of a woman now. It's like my body has changed tremendously. And last year was the first year where I experienced like a significant weight gain in my season. I think I gained about 10 pounds of muscle. And before, I guess I was just like too light. But then like kind of going to that heavier side, it was a really big shock to me. And then I was kind of told, okay, you might be on the like heavier side now. And it was really difficult to kind of come back, and it's like, okay, well, what's a happy medium? Like, where am I supposed to be? What's my ideal race weight? Where am I supposed to be in base season? Where am I supposed to be in like competition season? So it's like, it's this constant like battle of, okay, but when I did gain weight, I got a lot faster. So, you know, again, it's just that constant battle. And I think at the end of the day, it's really important to just feel comfortable with where you're at. And as long as you feel healthy and strong, I don't think a number on the scale really matters. And I know for me last year, it really did affect my mental performance a little bit at a certain point in time, because it was such a big change in my lifestyle. Having had said that, you know, again, when I gained that muscle and I gained that power, I did get a lot faster. So I've kind of come to peace with that. And I guess this is just like where I'm at right now, being more ideal for myself.
Awesome. Dr. Kraft, have you had any experience with athletes asking you questions like Marissa and Crystal have said about where is that happy medium? So what are power speed athletes, female athletes, supposed to look like?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes up. I mean, it's an issue in all sports, but in speed and power, you know, just like Marissa and Crystal were talking about, it's a bit of a fine line, because you need to have enough muscle to go quickly and to propel yourself. And, you know, we also need to make sure you're having enough nutrition and enough intake to repair everything, because sometimes we forget that your muscles actually grow and get stronger, not during your workouts, but during the recovery after. So yeah, we're always trying to find that balance of getting enough of what you need and supporting what you need to do, but then also supporting performance. And in theory, athletics is kind of appealing because body image really, it shouldn't matter. It's how fast did you go, and that's it. But it does come into play just in our society. So it's important to be aware of it and discuss it, but also make sure we manage it and optimize performance and health as well.
Yeah, and I find it really interesting. I thought there was going to be more of I find power speed athletes, female athletes, to be bigger, right? So compared to our middle distance and distance counterparts, we're bigger. And so a lot of times I find that some women are a little bit scared to put on the weight because of how they're going to look as they walk around, like not within sport, right? So looking too masculine, if you will. Do any of you experienced that kind of rhetoric where it's like you don't want to look too mannish or as a power speed, because we do need muscle. We do need to have more weight on our body, if you will, like Dr. Kraft said, to be able to propel ourselves through space and time. Have you experienced that, where that conversation with people? I'll go with Crystal to start.
Yeah. They try to sugarcoat it and say, oh, you look big. And I'm like, you mean I look strong? Like, I don't understand what you mean by big. Like, big can mean a lot of things. And some people don't know how to say it the correct way. So they say, do you play sport? And I'm like, oh, yes, I do track and field. And they're like, oh, yeah, you look kind of, strong. And I'm like, thank you. That's the way you put it. Like,
Yeah.
I like that. But yeah, I get that most times they know, okay, you play sport. I'm like, how do you know I play sport? Oh, I can see from your legs. I'm like, okay, gotcha. But then there's others that go, you look kind of like you're a strong girl. Like, ooh, are you supposed to look like that? And I'm like, how is a girl supposed to look? Like, I'm confused. Like, I do track and fields. I tell them all the things I've done, and they'd be like, oh, wow, like shocked. And I'm like, not my appearance shouldn't tell you, oh, you look like a man or you look too strong to be doing, like, how am I'm supposed to be sexy and run? How do you do that? Like, I do it on a daily, but am I not supposed to look like I have muscles to help me get down the track? Like, it doesn't make sense. So hearing that, sometimes I'm like, I brush it off because they don't know. But people in sport, I'm like, you should know better than to say I look like a man or I look too masculine to do sport. So sometimes I'm like, I'll ignore you for now.
And Marissa, what's your experience? Have you experienced anything, conversations like that?
Yeah, there's been a couple. Like, I feel like in early high school, like I was always I've always been like pretty like strong in my legs, like just naturally. That's always been the way I have genetically been. And like people used to call me like thunder thighs and everything because I had like strong legs and whatnot. And like a lot of my peers did not look the way I did. And it's like, it's weird because as being a person also with a disability, you kind of like stand out a little bit more. So that like can kind of create like uncomfortability in a sense. And then I've also heard comments of like, you look like you can beat up your boyfriend. And like that, like, yep. That just sometimes doesn't sit well because I'm like, how strong do you think I look? Like, I don't think I look that strong, but I guess to someone else who like doesn't see like high performance athlete every single day, can maybe feel like a little intimidated by it. Like I think people in general, like I think there's like this conception in society that like strong women are very intimidating. And so, but they don't like to use that word strong in like a positive context. I feel like it's constantly used in like a negative, has like a negative connotation to it. But this is the body that helps me run fast and helps me achieve all the goals and everything that I set out for. And, it helped me make the Olympics when I was 16 years old. And I think that, it's important to kind of like challenge those misconceptions of like being strong is not beautiful, because like it totally is. I think that everyone in their own individual way, especially in this sport, like people have so many different types of like so many different body types. Like you have people like, for example, me, like I always found it a little intimidating when I saw like girls with like 8-packs, and like I was like, man, I can never get that. Like I can never achieve that, even if I did 1,000 reps of core every single day. Like I'll never get that. But I just feel like in general, everybody has such a different body type, and their different body allows them to do everything that they like want to set out for. And again, especially being an individual with a disability, like my body is very different from someone else. And then in the para world, it's like a completely different like perspective, where you have so many different types of bodies, like so many different disabilities. Like it's not cookie cutter whatsoever. Everybody has their own experience. Everybody has their own challenges and their own like perceptions of how their body should look and how they feel. So yeah, it's a very like jumbled up concept, because like I feel like I come from like two different sides here, especially like being the only para athlete on my track team as well that I train with. So I've definitely feel like I've experienced like a lot of those little it's like instances where that's kind of happened.
By the way, if anybody can find one of those 8-packs, I would like to have one. I don't know where you get them from. But yeah, I find that the one beautiful thing about track and field is that it does allow for all these beautiful different bodies, both on the female and male side, because there is something for everybody, whether it be in the distance, the sprints or the throws. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, that our sport is beautiful, but that's one of the reasons why. And I must say that with Strong Women, you guys are you're all changing the perspective of what a beautiful body is. It can be strong and muscular, and it's still very feminine and beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to the next question, and I'll address this to Dr. Kraft. What are the energy imbalance issues in speed power? So I know a lot of the conversation is kind of centered towards more the middle distance and distance area, especially when we're talking about Red S, which I think was formerly known as the female athlete triad. I'm not too sure if that's correct, but could you discuss what Red S is, if I'm even pronouncing that right, or if it's just Reds? And give us a perspective on what it's like concerning female speed power athletes.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, before we used to refer a lot to the female athlete triad, which was a little more of a narrow concept than, I call it Red. Some people say Red S. No one's really sure. There's a hyphen in there. I say Reds because it's faster. But the female athlete triad was when we looked at low bone density, menstrual irregularity, and disordered eating. So it was really just those three things. And obviously it excluded half the population because it was just for females. And classically, it was always described as the people who are at high risk are in aesthetic sports or judge sports or long distance running. And then around 2014, the IOC put together a committee, and they came up with a new term, which is REDS, or relative energy deficiency in sport, which first of all is more inclusive because it doesn't only happen in females, it also happens in males. And it doesn't just encompass those three components. It also looks at endocrine changes, hormonal changes, mental health, cardiovascular health is actually affected if you're in low energy balance. So it's a much broader term. And as we learn more about it, we learn all the different effects. So that's kind of the term that we use more often now. And we're also learning more about it, that it's not just the distance athletes and it's not just the judge sports. We see it in a lot of different sports, including in speed power, especially if you have a high training volume, or you're doing all sorts of extra training. You don't just do your one event and then that's it. You have a lot of extra training coming in, and there are body image issues in the sport as well. So even over the last year and a half or so that I've been at the hub, and with Dr. Koros, who was there before me, we've started looking into more screening our speed and power athletes for energy deficiency and some of the blood work that we do. And with our dietitian, Jen, when she does her body composition assessments, we're becoming a lot more aware of it, and actually, catching things that we do need to monitor. So just within our own hub, we're noticing that it is more of an issue in speed and power than we thought. But we're trying to be proactive and manage it as best we can.
And for both Marissa and Crystal, were you ever familiar with, I guess, what was formerly known as the female athlete triad, now known as RED or RED S, or REDS or RED S? So I'll start with Marissa. Were you ever familiar with that term?
Yeah, so I was familiar with the athlete triad because of school, because I'm in sports media. That like is a conversation we've talked about in like social injustices in sport, like in those kind of classes. Actually, like in my sporting environment though, I actually never really like heard about it. So that was the only reason I was aware of it, was from school.
And Crystal, how about you? Were you ever aware of the term, the female athlete triad, formerly known as, and now currently known as RED S or REDS?
No, I have no idea. I had no idea about it.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting because, again, I believe that a lot of that conversation was always centered around more middle distance and distance runners, because they do put in such high volume, and especially with women who compete in those events, they might experience more of the effects of losing menstruation. Not to say that power speed athletes don't, but losing menstruation and some more of the bone, like the stress fractures, seem to be more common. But like Dr. Kraft said, it's something that happens with the power speed athletes. And so this is why these conversations are important, because I kind of feel like as a power speed athlete, you feel like you can eat whatever you want and it's okay because you can gain that muscle and it'll be fine. But the reality is different. We still do deal with, like we mentioned earlier, some of the body image issues where we want to be at our optimal race weight or whatever it may be, competition weight. So how do you manage that? And so you kind of go on this roller coaster of trying to make sure that you're eating enough, but at the same time, not too much, because you want to be so dialed in. So I think the conversation needs to be focused not just on the middle distance side, but also for us athletes in the power speed side. Next question. What are some general health injury issues that female speed power athletes must contend with? And I'll again start with Dr. Kraft. Have you seen any, I'd say, common injuries that power speed athletes deal with?
Seen lots of different injuries. I mean, it depends a bit on the event as well. I mean, with running, we're always worried about hamstrings, but not necessarily directly related to energy intake, but it can be, like with any injury, if we're seeing that someone's getting a lot of recurrent injuries or not recovering well, or even just having a bunch of different injuries, that's definitely something that we look at. And we do see stress fractures even in speed power athletes as well. And that's one of the reasons that we started paying a bit more attention to the energy intake and nutrition. But yeah, it really depends on the event. And I think, even in any of the events, nutrition's always a big thing. We're always, checking iron and vitamin D and B12. Those are some big things that we always want to check and optimize. And then other than that, the most common ones would be, strains, occasional, stress fractures, sometimes trauma if someone just steps wrong and rolls their ankle or things like that. But there is a wide variety.
Yeah, and I think with power speed being so varied, as far as we have our jumpers, so I'm assuming that you might get more of the impact because they are dealing more with the plyometric base of their event, versus the sprinters that are probably going to be more hamstring based. And I know both Marissa and Crystal quite well. We all work out of the East Hub. So I'll turn this over to Crystal. What do you find are kind of the common injuries for female speed power athletes that we usually have to contend with?
I would say hamstrings. For me, I've had a lot of hamstring injuries, but of recent years past, I've had a lot of foot problems because the constant pounding, we walk on our feet, we run, like doing all those things that you have to use your feet. I know I have a lot of that issues. I would say more hamstring issues for me.
And Marissa, what about in your experience? What do you find are the more common injuries for female speed and power athletes?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with hamstring as well. I've had 2 years ago, well, I guess 3 years ago now, I tore my hamstring at the London 2017 World Championships in the 200-meter final. And then last year I tore my hamstring tendon going into the knee on the left side. So I've definitely, those were both, I'm pretty sure, attributed to like burnout. But those were my like two big injuries I guess I've dealt with over the last few years. And then also being a single leg amputee, I deal with a lot of like stress on my left side. That having that said, that's like my knees, my hips, my ankle. Because I only have one ankle that I've been noticing lately has been a lot more difficult to manage and like needing a lot more treatment. Having had said that, I think that it's having like a good treatment plan and like whether it's weekly or every other week, whatever works for you, or even if it's like rolling out for yourself or having your own specific kind of plan that you have. I think it is important to have some sort of treatment in place because that's what I've noticed in the past was that I got injured because I was burnt out from school, I was burnt out from training, I was burnt out from a lot of other obligations that I had outside of that, and I completely put taking care of myself to the back seat, and that's where those injuries kind of occurred. So taking care of yourself at least once a week is so important, and to manage, those like little hiccups that come around every so often. That is something I've tremendously improved on, and especially training at the hub now, having like access to treatment there, that's made a massive difference in my week-to-week training and being able to recover and to continue just training really well.
And like Dr. Kraft said, nutrition does play a role in, obviously, with the stress fractures, perhaps not getting enough nutrition to meet the demands of training. But Dr. Kraft, what do you see? So if an athlete does get injured, do you find that there's, how should I state this, like a love-hate relationship with nutrition after the injury has already happened, as far as like, either athletes being a little bit overly concerned because they're not getting enough workout in because now they're in a state where they can't get the work done?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern that comes up, and it makes the calculation of how much energy do you really need a little bit harder, which is why I love my dietitian colleagues, because they're a lot better at doing all those calculations than I am. But we also have to take into account when you have an injury, you need extra nutrition for your body to rebuild that tissue and make it hopefully back to normal and as strong as it was before, or even stronger. And what we also look at is not just, okay, what can you not do now because of the injury, but what else can we do? So, no one likes getting injured, but it is a part of sport. But sometimes it can be a bit of a, I wouldn't say a blessing in disguise, because we don't want anyone to get injured, but it can be an opportunity to work on, other things where, if we have to scale back on one part of training, we might be able to work on other imbalances or strengthening some other part of the body that we might have ignored at other times. So, it's very rare that we totally shut anyone down from all types of training. If they have an injury, we try to keep up, as much as we can. And then there's also the rehab exercise part of that. So, we might have to modify nutrition a little bit if you're not working out as intensely or at the same volume, but it's just as important, if not more so, to get good nutrition and adequate nutrition when you're recovering.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the huge takeaways we can take from this, because I think sometimes the athlete mind, as soon as an injury happens, then we either let things go too far and we start getting into the junk food because what does it matter? I'm not training at this moment. Or we can go the other way and start overthinking and be like, I can't eat as much as I used to because I'm not putting in the same amount of volume. But to know that if you're struggling, so if you have any athletes that are out there struggling with that, make sure that you get them in to see a doctor or a nutritionist who can help them understand what their energy needs are, even though they're injured. So fantastic conversation with that. The next question that we'd like to address is, do speed power athletes struggle with losing their period? I know that obviously, again, this is more a question that has dominated the middle distance crew, but do women or female-bodied athletes in the power speed area lose their periods? And I'll address that to Dr. Kraft.
I'd say yes, it can happen. I haven't done a survey of all speed power athletes, so I can't give any exact percentage. And I think it's an area that's a bit neglected also in the research. There is a lot of research on, long distance runners, endurance athletes, but not as much in speed and power. So we don't really know what the extent of that is. I would say just anecdotally, we do see a lot of like irregular periods. It might depend on the time of the year too. If you're in a more intense training, then we might see periods being spaced out more or losing them for a certain amount of time and then coming back. But it is definitely something that we keep an eye on and we ask about. And it's a great indicator of energy balance. I mean, right now we're in an era where we also have lots of ways for people to control their periods. So that's kind of nice if you don't want to have it when you're competing, but it makes it a little bit harder for us to know what would be happening if someone didn't have an IUD or they weren't on the pill or they weren't controlling their periods. Because if you're not using any of those things, it's a lot easier for us to know what's your period actually doing. Are your hormones cycling normally, and to judge that. But we have other ways to check, not necessarily about periods, but about energy balance if we need to.
And I will then turn it over to Crystal. Have you ever experienced, if you don't mind sharing, have you ever experienced where you've missed a cycle while training?
Not that I remember. For me, menstrual cycle is horrible. For me, I have tried to stop it because it's so bad. I can't train. Sometimes I can't walk. So it's easier to miss it than to have it and go through that. Okay, I can't train today, miss a week, and then I'm struggling to get back because it's so bad. So missing, not that I remember, but like as I said, like it's that part of the month is very hard for me. So for me, I have a IUD to help somewhat control the pain and control what I'm trying to do in terms of training and not missing because of that. But I still have a control of when, where, and where my body should be at.
And Marissa, how about you? What's your experience? Have you ever missed a period while training?
No, I've actually had like a similar experience to Crystal where like it just like there were times where it completely affected my performance. There was actually one really big competition where I came on the day of and felt absolutely nauseous, sick to my stomach. It did affect my performance. After that, I had to kind of reassess from there because, you train so much and you put in all that time and for something that's obviously incontrollable. It was very frustrating because again, it's something you can't control or I couldn't control at the time. So, now I've resorted to a birth control where I can monitor that and it's very regular every single month. And it kind of completely took away all those symptoms and those pains that I would experience. And I guess I don't know what normal is, but to me, it made it normal, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult because I know a lot of times, I know personally, I would dread if my period would start the day before the day of a competition. That actually happened to me at the Commonwealth Games. I was lucky the 2018 Commonwealth Games, lucky to have it. The first day was really bad for me, and I had issues that made my period really bad. So full disclosure, I had uterine fibroids, which greatly affected my menstrual cycle. Same thing as Crystal. My first 2 days, I couldn't even leave the house. That's how bad it was. And it came with pain, but then also, again, to be as completely open as possible, a lot of blood loss, which Dr. Kraft helped with me getting iron infusions in order to make sure that my iron levels weren't too low, which was another bag to deal with. So working with female athletes or female-bodied athletes with a uterus, that is an issue that we should be taking into account. With that being said, do either one of you find that you use your period or your menstrual cycle as a measure of health? And I'll start with Marissa on this one.
Yes, definitely. I'm like a firm believer that it's like a natural occurrence of the body. So I personally don't like to skip out on it. Um, I pretty much know exactly the day of every single month that's coming. So I can kind of mentally prepare myself and like be ready for it. So yeah, I do not enjoy it. I don't enjoy getting it, but I do like having it at a regular time every single month because I believe it is still a natural occurrence of the body, and I don't want to kind of like shy away from that because I don't know. That's just kind of like what my beliefs are. I don't really have a reason for that. I feel like it's supposed to be there. So
And Crystal, what your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I agree with Marissa. It's healthy, like that's what our bodies is supposed to do. And for me, because of the pains and not being able to walk and not able to train, for me, I still know when, where, and then it goes back to mental as well. We think that when a lot of people think that when your period comes, it's it's just a period, but it also goes down to the mental side. Like sometimes I would be joyful, and as soon as I know it's coming, I'm like, I don't want to train today, but I have to. It's like an angel here, and then the devil's here, like, no, we're not doing that. Stay in bed, cover up, eat all the candy you want. And it's like, it's mental and the period coming at the same time. So for me, I think it's healthy that you know when, and then you can mentally prepare and be ready to train as well.
Yeah, and I was it just makes me think, what's your experience with your coaches as far as, because I know both of you are coached by male coaches. How do they interact with you when, say you're about to start your period and you know it's going to be a bad one? What's that experience like? And I'll start with Crystal on that one.
For me, working with my coach is Charles Allen. Working with him for some time, it's been a roller coaster because, as everyone knows, he's a male. He doesn't understand, but for me, he's been very, very understanding. Like I can be very open with him and being like, okay, coach, it's coming this week. I don't know where my mind's gonna be at, and everyone knows Charles. He's that person. Like he's prepared. Like okay,
Yeah.
I need you to tell me when and where, but he can tell when I'm not in the mood, or if he's trying to push me, he would know, like, okay, he would sometimes forget and be like, Crystal, what are you doing? I'm like, he's like, oh, wait, I forgot. So like, he's been very understanding. I can tell him when it's there and when I'm feeling, okay, coach, I'm not feeling it today. Not because I don't want to do it. It's just like my body won't let me. So being with him, just understanding me when and where, like I'm a female, things happen, and he understands, okay, I need to back off a little bit, or I can push her. I know when and where and when.
And Marissa, what's your experience with your coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with my coach, it's always good to have that like open dialogue, but also, he kind of knows like when you're having a bad day. Like today was a prime example. Like I literally got destroyed by my workout, and in the last rep, he's like, you know what, you can do 2 100s instead of a straight 200. And so like we kind of like, he kind of like senses the vibe and like knows kind of where I'm at, even though sometimes like I kind of hold it in sometimes. Like I don't really like admitting that like I can't do it. So I think that he's kind of like learned that from me in a sense, where he kind of knows like, okay, I think you need to like shut this down, or you need to like kind of move on to something else, or just kind of reevaluate and regroup. So like being with him for the last few years, I think we've kind of like established that like type of communication where it's like, even though if I don't want to talk about it, like if I don't want to say, okay, I can't physically do this today, like it's just not my day. He definitely reads me really well. So I think as coaches, it's really important to just kind of like create that relationship with your athlete, and just to know like know the person. Like, so for example, like Crystal is like very open about it and will say like, today's not my day. But for me, I kind of do like hold that in, because I do want to like track is like a happy place for me, right? And like regardless of like what's happening in like the world around me and like everything that's going on, I want to approach every single training and like get it done and like do it But having said that, you can't always do that. So yeah, as coaches, I think it's just important to be like open, understanding, and just really create that like strong relationship with your athlete.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think whether you're male or female, being able to understand there's quite a bit of psychology that goes into being a coach and being able to understand each individual athlete. But I also like to say that I think we've come a long way, because coaching is dominated by males, but there's more female athletes out there. And I think that as time has passed and we're getting more women involved in sport, men have taken on that topic of menstruation before, where it was so taboo and don't tell me about it, I don't want to know, maybe just don't even show up. I think now, because my coach is the same, he always knew if I didn't show up to practice, there was a reason why, and he could probably look at the calendar and figure out why, and there was no questions asked. I would always give him an update, and he's like, you don't even need to tell me. And he would check in to make sure that it was okay. So I think we've come a long way when it comes with predominantly males in the coaching sphere, coaching more women athletes, and being able to have those conversations and not get squeamish anymore, because it is a part of sport and working with female bodied athletes. So I think that's fantastic that you both have that relationship with your coaches. And real quick, I would like to send this question out to Dr. Kraft. Are there any myths concerning menstruation and the period and athletic performance?
I would say I was really happy to hear Crystal and Marissa talk about how they view their period as a measure of health, because it wasn't like that in the past. Like probably maybe 20 or 30 years ago, a lot of athletes would view losing their period as a sign that they were training enough and being fit enough, which we now know is actually totally the opposite. It means that you don't have enough energy for your body to do its normal hormonal cycles, and then we can extrapolate that to, you don't have enough energy to repair your muscles, you don't have enough energy to perform at your best. So yeah, we view periods as, that's if your body has enough energy to run, then your hormones will cycle and you'll get a period every month, unless there's other things that can cause irregular periods. But if you don't have any of those, then that's really what we look for. And we did touch on, kind of the other side of periods can cause all sorts of their own problems in terms of symptoms and premenstrual issues and cramping and blood loss and iron loss. So, I'd say, I'm encountering more and more athletes who they do want an IUD, or they want to use birth control pills or other methods just to have some measure of control. And like I said, from a medical perspective, it makes it a bit harder to monitor, because if someone's not on those, it's really easy for us, like, we're not happy if people are having cramping every month, but if you're having cramping every month and you're having your period, that's great. It means your hormones are cycling. So from that perspective, it's good, but from the performance and feeling good perspective, it's not. And depending, which methods we use, like certain hormonal IUDs, we can still check estrogen levels to make sure that those are high enough. But yeah, I would say recently, luckily, I haven't encountered too many myths, but in the past, that was definitely an issue where people thought it was a good thing to lose their period, and absolutely it's not, and we know that would be a big mistake.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I think that was something that I've encountered, especially in the literature and how it's kind of grown. So it's great that there's more research being done and understanding of where menstruation lies in relation to sport. I would say that the one myth that I think is that if you have your period, you can't perform well. Although there are times when, those symptoms are terrible. I think, especially when I was in university, it was like the kiss of death. Like if you get it, then there's no way. But I think that women athletes or athletes that menstruate, they know how to cope. And if they have a good support team, especially in power speed, all you need is 11 seconds. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever the time is. And you might look like you can't do it, but if you're able to work with an athlete and understand and be very supportive, you can see some amazing performances, even when women or athletes who menstruate are performing and as they're menstruating. So that's one thing, is if you have a good support system, a lot of that you can wrap your mental self around it and still be able to perform even through the terrible cramps and blood loss and all that. It might be harder, I don't know, because I only run the 800. That's as far as I go, but it might be harder as a middle distance runner. But I think female athletes do persevere through those times. It's not a guaranteed kiss of death. It might be unpleasant, but it's not a kiss of death for sure. So, well, that's all of the questions that we had already outlined. So I'd like to go ahead and start addressing questions that have come in from people who are in on this webinar. Let's see. So this one, I believe would be more for Dr. Kraft. What kind of prevention / information does the medical team do for coaches and athletes concerning the topic of RED-S?
Okay, so I think it depends a bit. If we're talking about at the hub, that's sort of our CAP athletes, or the athletes who have the most support and the full IST. So with most of our athletes, we'll actually have IST meetings with the coach periodically. And then each member of the IST, so it's not just medical, like I'll give my perspective, Jen, who's our dietitian, will give her perspective, and she's also monitoring body composition and checking in about energy availability. And then the both of us will kind of jointly analyze blood work or decide what blood work we need to make sure that everything's where we want it to be. And you know, we also have our biomechanist involved, and physio and chiropractic and strength and conditioning. So I wouldn't say we have any formal education or prevention program involving the coaches at the hub, but we address it on a regular basis in our meetings. And then with athletes, we do our intake process once a year or whenever a new athlete joins at the hub. And again, we don't have a specific kind of learning module that everyone does about RED-S, but that's usually when we'll check in if there are any nutritional issues, if there have been any recurrent injuries. We'll make sure that we have up-to-date blood work and see if there's anything else that we need to check. And then Jen will usually also do her her dietitian nutrition intake as well. And then we'll periodically get together, even outside of some of the coaches meetings, and just as an IST, put our heads together and communicate with each other as we need to, and make sure everyone's up to date. Otherwise, more broadly, I think Athletics Canada has had a few different webinars targeted at different levels this year for coaches and different groups. But I mean, we're always looking if there's more information or education that people want, then we can always do more education sessions like this.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next question, and this goes to Marissa and Crystal. Do you feel any social pressure regarding your career and potentially starting a family? So I will start with Crystal on that.
Not really. I've been told I look very young, and then when people ask me how old I am and I say, well, I'm 28 or I'm 29 now, they'd be like, no, you're not. You look 20. And I'm like, well, thank you. But I'm a bit older. For me, I've always wanted to start a family at an early age in like my 20s. But seeing my accomplishments and how hard I train and trying to get all the goals I want to get in a certain time frame, I haven't really, I know I want a family. Not a lot of people have asked me, oh, do you not want kids? Like, I can have kids at 40, I think, right, Dr. Kraft? But for me, no social, like nothing that really gets me thinking of that kind of stuff. Like I'm my own person. I can't let the outside world pressure me to have kids because I'm getting older. I'm getting older. That's fine. There's other methods of having a family, not only just carrying a child. So for me, I've been positive and staying en route. When it's time, the Lord would give me that sign. So for me, I'm all clear.
Yeah. And Marissa, I know you're quite a bit younger than definitely myself. Do you feel any pressures? Have you had any pressure, social pressure to think about starting a family?
Not particularly. I'm 21, so I'm like very far from that. But of course I want a family in the future. It's just I don't know when that will be. So I guess life will take its course, but not particularly any pressure. Maybe for my parents, they're like, "How long did you do this sport for?" And I was like, "I don't know, till I'm like 30, hopefully." And they're like, "We want grandkids, so."
Just letting you know, we want grandkids. I think that's a very interesting question, because obviously that question isn't really necessarily addressed to male athletes, because they don't have to carry, obviously, and a lot of times people find that if as soon as you have children, that's the end. You're just a mother, and that's all it is. But we've seen quite a few athletes who have had children who have come back. Nia Ali is a prime example. She had a child. She has 2 children, came back and won world championships. So I think, again, the same thing. Things are changing now, where women aren't necessarily just seen as, okay, you can kind of follow your dreams for a little bit, but ultimately what you should be focused on is having a family and taking care of that family. I think things are starting to look much different, where, you know what, we can multitask. Obviously, for those 9 months, might be tough, or like Crystal said, there's other methods you can adopt. Do you know what I mean? And if you have a strong support system, being able to take care of a family doesn't have to exclude you pursuing your dreams. And everybody's road is a little bit different. Me personally, FYI, if you don't know, I'm 40 years old and I'm still doing the sport. And obviously, I have had that question. Whether or not I'm thinking about having children. I'm hoping, you never know, like I'm hoping maybe I can carry, but also I think we also need to have that conversation of, some women don't want to have children, and that's okay too, right? You're no less of a woman, or you're no less of a woman if you don't want to have children. Do you know what I mean? And or if you just want to adopt, like we don't have to be seen in just that light. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective on that. Again, this will go to both the athletes on the panel, and we'll start with Marissa on this. How has social media impacted your sense of self? That's a good question.
I don't follow a lot of influencers, or like quote unquote influencers, what we like describe them as, or a lot of like workout pages and stuff like that, because it is very impactful on your mental health and your like self well-being. I feel like if I looked through like one Instagram model's page, instantly I'm like, oh my God, I feel like really shitty about myself. So I just like don't personally like go down that pathway, because I feel like it can be a very, very dark, deep pathway for people. And I've seen it happen to like some peers and some friends and everything. So I personally try and not go down that route. But you still, again, even just following other athletes, and like I still sometimes compare myself. I'm like, that whole like, I think that 6-pack analogy is like the perfect thing. It's like, I'll never.
It was an 8-pack.
I will never have that. I've tried. But this X, Y, and Z, these athletes are able to achieve that so much easier than I am. So I feel like social media in the grand scheme of things is a really big part of, being a high performance athlete, being a role model to so many other individuals. I try and communicate as much positivity and inspiration as much as I can to the people who follow me. I don't personally like to, create this like perfect image, like there's there's like a lot of humility I face with on a daily. For example, like how I just got literally destroyed by my workout today. So I just feel like in general, social media can be a very, very toxic place, but it can also be a very fantastic place if you choose for it to be. So I think that is a great takeaway, is just like, you have the power. Like that is literally like being a sport media student, social media, digital media is there's like a massive uprise of it right now. And the biggest part of it is that you are in control. You have the ability to share your own voice, and you have the ability to see what you want to see. And I think that at the end of the day, if you feel like social media is becoming a toxic environment for you, then think, maybe reflect on it, and just try and figure out a way to make it a positive impact in your lifestyle.
Fantastic. And Crystal, what are your thoughts? How has social media impacted your sense of self?
For me, I'm more of it goes through one ear and comes through the next. I hold what is important and what's not. For me, I've been through a lot of years of being told what I need to look like, how I should speak, and all that type of stuff to get what I want. And that's just not me. Like, I've been told I should put in hair, post more, natural isn't the thing anymore. But now, as years gone by, you've seen more natural hair and more being more yourself. So for me, I tend to, as people say, like, social media blackout. So I don't really watch or see what's going on social media in terms of listening to people. Oh, I should be more like her, or I need to show more skin, or I should change my image to be someone I'm not. So for me, social media isn't, for me, like, I feel like I've seen so many people go down the social media route being like, oh yes, this is me. And then when they come out of social media, it's like, who am I? Like, I need to be social media all the time. So for me, I tune out. Like, social media is like maybe an hour, 2 hours, like, okay, scrolling, and then that's it. Then I go back to, okay, who's Crystal? What I need to do. Like, social media isn't who I am. And as Marissa said, like, you have control of who you are. Social media isn't you. Like, it's just, you can delete the app. If I could delete you, that means you're not that important. You're not that important. So I take what's important, and what's not, I discard.
Nice. Yeah. And I think, I'm so old, I don't even really know how to post properly. So I usually end up just posting ridiculous stuff, and it is what it is. But like you both said, it is what you make of it. I know there's a dark side to it, and it can affect mental health, but at the end of the day, you can delete the app. Do you know what I mean? I think some of the pressure comes that it's tied to your brand, right? And you want to be able to get sponsorship, especially as women in this sport where there isn't a lot of opportunities as far as making money from this sport. It ends up being an exercise in of your passion rather than trying to make a living from it. I can attest to that. But yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, I think both of your perspectives is really nice to hear for other kids who are coming up, other young women who are coming up in the sport, to know that ultimately it's not the be all end all, and to focus on what you want. And if you do that, then good things will come your way, with or without social media. Where are we at? Oh, we're almost out of time. Really quick, the last question that we have on here, and this is for both the athletes, if you can just give me like a real 1 minute quick answer, is what kind of support do you wish you could get from your coach or support staff regarding body image issues and REDs? So Marissa, if you'd like to go first.
I personally feel like I've been put in a really, really great environment to have all the support I've needed over the past few years. Athletics Canada, all the staff, my coach, my strength trainer at the University of Toronto, all have been like very, very positive, influential people in my life. And I'm very, very grateful to have that. I can understand that a lot of people might not have that situation. And so, but it's also allowed me to flourish and to feel confident in my own skin, even though all of us can have our own insecurities at times. For the most part, I'm pretty happy with how far I've come. I mean, I started the sport when I was 13 years old, and I think 13-year-old me would be very, very proud of 21-year-old me. So I just think that I've been very, very fortunate to have the support systems that I've had, and it's really just shown like positive environments create create champions. So I think we should continue to like share that message, and hopefully we can start instilling that in other communities, other coaching environments, and so on.
And Crystal, your take?
Yeah, same as Marissa. I've been put in a situation where I have a great coach, support staff, in terms of menstrual and being able to know, okay, I need to support her, because a lot of females don't get that support in terms of that, in that kind of issue. So I feel like more coaches need to be more open to it and listen, okay, and deal with each athlete, female athlete individually, like know what, where, and how they need to help in that area. I feel like that would help a great deal of females to become champions like me and Marissa.
Awesome. And I'm not too sure. I'm asking to see if we, oh, okay, we do have some more time. I wasn't too sure if this thing was just going to shut off right at 5 or yeah, at 5 o'clock, but we do have time for one more question. And this one is directed towards, it's directed for Dr. Kraft. From a female 60-year-old competitor in the 800 and 1500. Fantastic, that's amazing. Do you, Dr. Kraft, have any recommendations for preventing age-related muscle loss? Sarcopenia, I believe is what it's called. This athlete lifts free weights, takes supplements like HMB, and notes that most of the research has been male focused. So do you have any recommendations for preventing sarcopenia?
I think this is a big topic. We could do a whole other hour panel on this. I think the key, just like those athletes lifting weights, I would say that's one of the main things is to keep up resistance training and cross training. Running is great for keeping up aerobic fitness, but for preventing that muscle loss, really strengthening it is the main way to go. And then making sure that you have all the building blocks in your diet and enough nutrition. And if you're worried about that or you need help with it, then I would recommend seeing a registered dietitian who specializes in sport nutrition. Like I said, they're way better than, you can certainly see a sport doctor, but the dietitians are way better than us at calculating exactly how much you need and if you're getting all of your macronutrients and micronutrients. And they can also help advise about which supplements you might need depending on your diet and your current health status and body composition and all of that. But it definitely is possible to prevent age-related muscle loss. I've seen cross-section MRI, I don't remember where I saw it, of I think it was a 60-year-old who was lifting weights, and they had almost exactly the same body composition as a 20 or 30-year-old. So you can keep it up. You just have to keep working those muscles. Like we say, if you don't use it, you lose it, but you can keep it up for sure.
Well, and that's great news for me because I'm 40 and I love hearing that. And I know there was a question speaking to the a long-term career. And I think that actually is a part of it. If you just kind of don't stop and you keep going, if you have the mental fortitude and put in the work, that's how you can elongate your career, or maybe even pick up the career at an older age. So males or females. So I think that is all that we have for our time on this. I would love to thank everybody who participated. So Crystal, thank you so much. Marissa, thank you so much. And Dr. Kraft, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, all of you, your experiences when it comes to the topic of female perspectives on coaching speed power. I would also like to thank Athletics Canada for bringing this topic up. I feel like sometimes power speed athletes, female power speed athletes, are left out of some of these conversations, but if anything, maybe this is the start to many more conversations that we can have from all athletes that cover the power speed, be it jumpers, throwers, and sprinters, and maybe some heptathletes as well. So again, I would love to thank everybody for your time this evening. I'm sure it has been illuminating and enlightening for many people who have participated. So thank you all again. And you all take care, especially during these times. Make sure that you're staying healthy and take care of each other. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.